Northern California, covering nearly 60% of the state's land but home to only a third of its population. In some counties, there are just 2 people per square mile. Why is this part of California so empty, and what makes living here so difficult? Long before the gold rush transformed California forever, the region's indigenous peoples lived in harmony with the challenging landscapes in this area. The Ohlone, Miwok, and dozens of other tribes had mastered life among the fog-shrouded redwood forest, wind-swept coastlines, and snow-capped peaks. But today, the population distribution tells a very different story. While the San Francisco Bay Area teems with over 7 million people, drive just a few hours north, and you'll find yourself in counties larger than some states, yet home to fewer people than a small suburban town. The uneven distribution of people in Northern California is, first of all, due to its rugged geography. The Coast Ranges in Sierra Nevada create natural barriers, making settlement difficult. The region's mountain ranges, valleys, and coastlines have long posed challenges for habitation. But why hasn't modern technology and infrastructure overcome these natural barriers? After all, we've built cities in deserts, on frozen tundra, and even in the middle of the ocean. The answer lies in a combination of geographic isolation, climate challenges, and historical accidents. Take the Lost Coast, for example. A 100-mile stretch of pristine coastline, so rugged that highway builders in the 1930s simply gave up trying to extend California's famous Pacific Coast Highway through the region. Even today, this remains the largest undeveloped coastal area in the continental United States. Modern engineering could technically build a road there now, but the cost would be astronomical. We're talking billions of dollars to connect a region with fewer residents than a single city block in San Francisco. This pattern of geographical isolation repeats throughout Northern California. The Klamath Mountains, Six Rivers National Forest, and the Cascade Range create a natural maze that has historically limited development. But while geography played a crucial role in keeping people away, it's just the first piece of a much larger puzzle. Let's look at the climate factor. Northern California experiences some of the most extreme weather variations in the state. While the coast gets drenched with up to 100 inches of annual rainfall in some areas, creating lush rainforests, the inland regions can swing from scorching summers to freezing winters. The Shasta Trinity region, for instance, can see temperature variations of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year. Add in the constant threat of wildfires, and you begin to understand why early settlers often chose easier territories to call home. But there is another crucial factor keeping this region sparsely populated: water resources. Or rather, the complicated relationship between where the water is and where people can actually live. Northern California holds 75% of California's water resources, yet much of this water is inaccessible for large-scale urban development due to both geographic and legal constraints. While Northern California has more fresh water than it could ever use locally, most of this water is already claimed by cities and agricultural regions hundreds of miles to the south. The state's complex water rights system, some dating back to the Gold Rush era, means that many Northern California communities actually struggle to access the water flowing through their own backyards. It's a perfect example of how historical decisions continue to shape settlement patterns today. Speaking of the Gold Rush, this pivotal moment in California's history actually played a surprising role in keeping Northern California's population low. While the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill in 1848 initially drew hundreds of thousands of people to Northern California, the long-term effects were unexpected. The rush created a boom and bust pattern that established San Francisco as the region's dominant city, drawing resources and infrastructure away from other areas that might have developed into major population centers. Think about that for a moment. What happens when a single city becomes the focal point for an entire region's economic development? The result is a gravitational pull that makes it increasingly difficult for other cities to grow beyond a certain point. We can see this effect clearly in the development patterns of Northern California's transportation infrastructure. Take Trinity County, for example. Despite being larger than the state of Delaware, it's home to just 16,000 people and doesn't have a single traffic light. Even more surprisingly, it's one of the few counties in California without a single mile of federal interstate highway. This wasn't just an oversight. The rugged terrain made highway construction so expensive that planners simply routed major roads around the region entirely. But modern history has played an equally important role in maintaining this sparse population pattern. In the early 20th century, while Southern California was experiencing a massive population boom driven by the entertainment industry and aerospace manufacturing, Northern California's economy remained largely focused on resource extraction, logging, mining, and fishing. The very factors that kept people away from Northern California have now become some of its greatest assets. The region's vast empty spaces have allowed for the preservation of some of America's most pristine wilderness areas. The Six Rivers National Forest, Redwood National Park, and the Marble Mountain Wilderness aren't just empty spaces on a map. They're crucial ecological preserves that help maintain California's biodiversity and combat climate change. In a twist of historical irony, the same geographical isolation that frustrated early settlers now protects some of the state's most valuable natural resources. The modern era has brought new challenges and opportunities to Northern California. The rise of remote work during the pandemic led some to predict a population boom in these less developed areas. After all, if you can work from anywhere, why not choose a place with lower costs and natural beauty? But the reality has been more complicated. The lack of robust infrastructure, particularly high-speed internet and healthcare facilities, has limited the appeal of remote living for many potential residents. Even in areas with good connectivity, the threat of wildfires has become an increasingly serious deterrent. Climate change has added another layer of complexity to the region's habitability. While Northern California has always dealt with natural disasters, the increasing frequency and intensity of wildfires, droughts, and atmospheric rivers have made living in remote areas more challenging than ever. The 2020 fire season alone burned over 4 million acres across California, with many of the largest fires occurring in the northern part of the state. Let's look at the numbers to understand just how dramatic this population disparity is. Modoc County, which covers over 4,000 square miles, has a population density of just 2.5 people per square mile. Compare that to Santa Clara County in the Bay Area, which has over 1,500 people per square mile. Even more striking, San Francisco County packs nearly 18,000 people into each square mile. The tech boom of the late 20th century only reinforced these patterns. While it brought tremendous wealth and population growth to the San Francisco Bay Area, it largely bypassed the northern counties. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Northern California's sparse population isn't about what's missing. It's about what's been preserved. In an era of rapid urbanization and environmental degradation, Northern California stands as one of the last great wild places in the American West. Its empty spaces aren't a sign of failure, but a testament to nature's resilience. These vast, untamed landscapes serve as a vital carbon sink, wildlife corridor, and watershed for much of the western United States. The region's low population density has preserved something increasingly rare in our modern world: genuine wilderness. While much of California has been transformed by human development, Northern California offers a glimpse of what the state looked like before European settlement. Its empty spaces maintain crucial wildlife corridors, protect endangered species, and provide recreational opportunities that become more valuable as the rest of the state grows increasingly crowded. Looking to the future, Northern California's population patterns seem unlikely to change dramatically. The same geographic, climatic, and infrastructural challenges that historically limited settlement continue to shape development patterns today. Yet in an age of increasing environmental awareness and climate change, these empty spaces may prove to be Northern California's most valuable asset, not as areas waiting to be developed, but as crucial preserves of biodiversity and natural resources that benefit the entire state.